what I'm going to ask you to do is we have, let's see, Tom Trewinnard from Meedan, right? Yep. And then we have Maria Sanchez Diez from Electionland. And then we have Aimee Rinehart from First Draft. And they all have experiences in dealing with elections, similar experiences. And they're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to ask them just to have them introduce themselves a little bit more and talk a little bit about their particular experiences for just about 3-4 minutes. So then we can go straight to your questions. And through this, we're going to kind of get more of a global look at this issue and see how you folks might be able to adapt, borrow, or steal. And I think because Aimee is from First Draft and they were a partner with the French project, I'm going to start with Aimee.
Thanks. Am I on? Okay. It's great to be here. I can't believe we're a year out from crosscheck, or a year and change out from crosscheck. So much has happened. With crosscheck, we learned so much about collaboration. Collaborative projects feel on one day like they're going to be amazing, and then the next day they feel like they're going to fall completely apart. And I think that's the nature of experimentation and trying to do something very different that newsrooms haven't done in the past. So with crosscheck, what we got into was getting newsrooms together to work on something, but we also discovered that there's a point of discovery in the process of not just being reactive to problematic content that's out there, but being proactive and seeing the types of information campaigns or disinformation campaigns that are going out and have the potential to go viral, and how we can help the public understand what that means. So what we do is we like to go in and build capacity in a newsroom or a country in terms of giving everybody skills to learn how to verify information online. So that's kind of where we are. We're looking at a project in Brazil and also in Indonesia to bring capacity into those newsrooms, to give them new skills, and to also be aware that journalists are now targets of disinformation campaigns. So we also work very closely with Facebook and Google on these projects. With crosscheck, we came up with that idea in December, and we kind of needed a check cut on Monday. So in order to get that money quickly, it was really the platforms that came up and helped us do that. They promised us complete autonomy when it came to editorial decisions, and they stuck by that. They were also big helpers in terms of promoting the project and making sure that we had the resources we need to get those projects done. So our experience so far has been that they've been amazing partners and helpful in getting the projects done.
Maybe we can go to Maria then.
Hi everybody, my name is Maria Sanchez and I'm the partner manager for Electionland 2018. Electionland is a project, a collaborative journalism project that will cover voting access, misinformation around voting, problems that citizens have when they try to exercise their right to vote. As you might know, Electionland was born in 2016, the 2016 election. It was an effort that had the same goal, covering voting access, and it brought together 1,100 journalists from all over the country around this topic. It was a very successful experiment, so that's why we're doing it again. There's gonna be a couple of changes. It's gonna be smaller and sharper. That means that we're gonna have fewer journalists who are gonna have access to our full data, and then we're gonna have a larger cohort of people, of local journalists in areas where we think there's gonna be problems, and we're gonna be able to contact them during early voting and on election day and let them know that something is happening in their counties or in their polling stations, so they can go there, report on those issues, and hopefully have impact and have poll workers and election officials fix those problems while there's still time for people to vote. So that's the premise of the whole project, very shortly explained.
And have you chosen the news organizations and locations already, or if someone out here thinks that they're could have a hot spot coming up,
Yeah, sure. Like if anybody here is interested in the project, I'm gonna be here the rest of the day, and you can come ask questions and talk to me. We're in the process of choosing, and also we launched the project yesterday, sorry, so people can go to the website and sign up to talk to us, and we can follow up with them and see what we can do together. So we're in the process of that, yeah.
Great. Okay. Tom?
Hey, everybody. Oh, hi, everybody. I work for a team called Meedan, and we were involved in Electionland and in Crosscheck, which were amazing collaborations around elections and verification, disinformation. Since March of this year, we've been working on a project called Verificado in Mexico, which is a collaboration between 80 news organizations who are working together both to tackle this problem of misinformation and disinformation that's being shared virally on social networks and WhatsApp. We're also going to be doing a kind of Electionland style effort around Election Day in Mexico, which is a really key priority for the project. We don't know how that voting process is going to be, and I think there's a lot of value in the Electionland model of finding that kind of stuff. And we've also been fact-checking the politicians. We're working with Animal Político and AJ Plus Española, the lead partners, and they're amazing fact-checkers. So we've been also fact-checking the candidates themselves. And it's been kind of amazing 6 weeks of the project where we've gained a really high profile in Mexico. All the candidates know who we are. A lot of celebrities are kind of tweeting about us. So it's kind of a lot of focus on the work, which introduces a lot of pressure, for sure. But it's been super exciting. Also, just to see the collaboration on production, I think, which is really interesting between the Verificado team and the AJ Plus Español team, who've done an amazing job of producing the kind of video content that I think Greg was talking about at the end there. So,
I know we're going to turn to questions here in a sec here, but could you, given that we had kind of a deep look at what happened in France, were there any big differences, significant differences, or were the experiences similar?
I think similar. I think a lot of the challenges that Greg highlighted resonate. The kind of scale and profile has gotten very big very quickly. I think that introduces maybe a new kind of pressure, but I think there's been a really great response from the audience. I think we have like 140,000 followers on Twitter after a couple of weeks, all organic. So I think it shows that there's a real desire to learn about this stuff. Some of the content that's done really well has been how do you do a reverse image search on your mobile phone. There's also been kind of educational content that has been produced by Animal Político with AJ Plus Español.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go to Stephanie.
Here we go. I'm back. So we got a flood of questions in via text message when the panel was coming up. So thank you for that. We probably have at least 6 or 7. So we're going to go through some of those, and then I want to open it up to audience questions. And we've got plenty of time. We've got a good 30 minutes to talk together about these amazing projects from around the world. So to start with, one of the questions that came in was, can you talk a little bit about how you make sure that your efforts are not perceived as siding with one candidate or another? And that's something that Gregoire mentioned about one of his slides being seen as a pro-Macron. I can never say that properly. So talk to us a little bit about how you think about that and how you work to make sure that that is not the case as best you can.
Yeah, that was a problem, and we had a lot of discussions about it because, as I underlined, the most of the hoaxes were coming from the far right in France, which is called fascosphere, and they are very strong and smart on social media. They know really well how to use this and how to create a lot of virality. But so we were. Some days we were desperately seeking from hoaxes coming from the first left, but they were not. They were not. So the problem is, yes, a lot of people were seeing us as as pro-Macron, because I think I don't have any precise statistics about it, but I think that's at least 80% of the doxies were targeting Macron. But I mean, we cannot say, okay, no, today we have debunked 2 stories about Macron, we can do not more. We need to find something about, There were no, for example, there were no fakes or false or rumors about Marine Le Pen from on the far right. So that's a problem. That's a problem. But we cannot. But we have to debunk every stories, even if they were targeting the almost every time the same candidates. But that's why I'd say at the end, that's why we want to go further with every participant, and we're really thinking to go to do more than politics, because we don't want to give that impression of pro-Macron or be too on one side, because when you're talking about climate or education or stuff like that, there is no, it's not politics really different. So yeah, but that was a problem, but we have to do with it, and we cannot change. We cannot change. I mean, that's it.
Sometimes we get just talk. Okay. Sometimes we get accused that we are dealing mostly with left-leaning news organizations. And for Brazil Election Project, the partners that we've identified, other people have said those are right-leaning, and I was like, we've never had that problem. So in some ways, it's really hard to get a good array of partners, because all the partners, if they're going to work together, have to trust one another. And if there's a very polarizing news organization, that it's hard to get work done. It's hard to get trust built in that. But I think it also speaks to the importance of having a diverse representation of information, because what one person sees online and considers disinformation is what somebody else would see in what they're looking for too.
I'm not sure if that's so much a problem for Electionland, since it's a project about voting access and voting rights. And that should be a topic that goes beyond party lines, although there's a little bit of partisan debate around voter fraud and that kind of stuff, as probably you know. But of course, we want to make sure that we incorporate a very diverse pool of partners, and that means from every possible perspective, ideologically, but also to make sure that we incorporate Hispanic media, ethnic media, and media outlets that represent communities that are not so heard normally on the mainstream media.
Good point. I think we have exactly the same challenges as Crosscheck in Mexico, where face a lot of attacks for perceived pro-López Obrador, who is one of the left-wing candidate who is most commonly attacked. There's a lot of fake content and misinformation, disinformation shared about it. And so I think, we've tried to kind of diversify a little bit of what we're working on. So looking at the fact that Mexico has one of the most advanced kind of social media manipulation mechanisms. We've done some analysis of how bots are trending hashtags related to the election. So it's, again, kind of not something that's pro one candidate or about a candidate necessarily, but is more about the information ecosystem. And I think building a broad coalition of partners, we have really a wide range of kind of independent and local media, but also some of the big national media that doesn't just bring a kind of political balance, but also gives a lot of exposure to kind of the audiences that wouldn't otherwise see the stuff you're doing. There's a risk, I think, if you just kind of leftish independent media, that you're going to be talking to the people who already know this stuff. And if you want to really have impact in terms of debunks and making sure that there's a higher quality of information, you need to kind of work with people who have different audiences, might have different views.
Did separate from the project, investigating the far right or other political groups that are weaponizing election news or misinformation. Does doing an investigation and publishing that investigation help to mollify the criticism that you might be leaning one way or the other? Does that make sense?
Can you repeat, please? Sorry.
So I'm wondering if you're receiving complaints that you're being perceived as being partisan, does simply exposing the fact that it is the far right is the main culprit of using misinformation to try to inflame political views?
I don't think that we said that this was coming from the far right or from the far left. There's a protocol with verification that is very transparent on the website, and I think that transparency does build trust with readers. That's the aim of it. It also sharpens other skills. The point of the cross-check was that one journalist would do a check on a piece of content, and then two other journalists would go through the same methods, and if they arrived at the same conclusion, then they would apply their logo to it. So everything that was published to the website had to have 3 newsrooms and an editor look over it. So, it wasn't only until after the election. I mean, you can see in real time, there seems to be a lot of problematic content around Macron, but we couldn't really draw an analysis until afterward, where it's like, oh my gosh, that whole Twitter bubble is right here, and it's infecting this one particular point of view.
I think that one of the things that helps address this a little bit and has been built into all of these projects really has been making sure that the audience has a way to reach out to you and contact you and ask you questions, whether it's using Hearken or Screen Door. We have a WhatsApp channel and a hashtag that is, we want you to verify. So making sure that you're kind of open to receive requests to verify from across the spectrum is one way that we've dealt with this.
Yeah.
Just to add one thing, the problem in cross-check, when that was the idea emerged, that the conservative media in France were not interested in the project. I don't know why, but that's it. They are not really interesting in. They don't do debunking and fact-checking more very early. So that's why it was important to have local newspaper, because in France they're not seen as conservative or liberal. They're seen as neutral. So yeah, they don't have the local newspaper didn't have many resources to put on the project, but to have their help on certain topics and to have their logos on the project was really important to give a more neutral image of the project.
Okay. One other question that came in was talking about how you're tracking the audience awareness before and after projects and tracking the impact. And I know after Crosscheck there was a fantastic research study published that showed some very tangible outcomes. So if we talk for a moment about that and then talk about how you measure your reach and your impact and the awareness before and after, so you can judge how much of a difference it made from that perspective.
Honestly, what I've told is coming a lot from my own experience and also from the researchers. Unfortunately, we didn't have too much time to measure the impact during the project because we were all very involved in the writing, in the stories. But what was really positive that even during the project, in the comments, most of the time, for example, where we are doing debunkings on AFP, we have a lot of negative comments. But during the cross-check project, the comments had another tone, really more positive. I mean, this is just a feeling, but that was really different because when there is one media, it said, okay, you're saying that, you're saying it's false, so that is true because you're saying that it's false. I don't know if I'm clear. But with all the medias, all the media outlets involved, the tone of the comments were really different, and we have many less insults, for example, on social media than when we are alone as as one media on the social networks. So, and I cannot say too much about the afterwards because I didn't do the research, but really you can have a look at it on the first draft website.
This is a question that's really interesting for me, and something that I hope to walk off with from this project is I hope to come up with metrics for collaborations, and I ask myself often, how do they look like? Is the likelihood that you will work again with those people? Is it the reach that you get together on the coverage? Are you really making a change for the communities you're trying to serve? Are you solving problems for anybody? And I wonder like how you guys think about those. I think in the case of Electionland, I see it as a project that serves voters, and that goal is very specific. And when you put a community, in this case voters, in the center of the project, of the design of your work, I think it makes things easier. But I'm also wondering how those things are, how we are going to articulate them, how we're going to document them, so we can measure them and say what worked, what didn't.
I think this hits on a key need for these projects moving forward. As Greg says, it's incredibly difficult to try and do this research while you're in the middle of this, what can feel sometimes like an information war. It's the Cambridge Analytica stuff came out since we started the project. It's clear that they've, have been very active in Mexico. So, but I think there's definitely more resources needed that can be dedicated to that kind of research. I suspect that this center is probably one of the people that who can do a lot of support there, along with First Draft. We have academic partners on Verificado who are doing some analysis of kind of discrete pieces of the project, somewhat tangential to kind of audience impact. But at the moment, we're using kind of anecdotal, looking at a lot of comments. We're trying to use pretty standard engagement metrics, which itself is really difficult when you have 80 partners who are all publishing on their own channels. It's really hard to get a sense for how far one debunk has traveled. That's a very simple question, but it's very hard to answer on these projects.
Yeah. And actually, that is our next research project, which we hope to have something published by the end of the year, looking at impact and awareness of collaborations, not election related specifically, but collaborations. So we have a bunch more questions via text from the live stream and from folks in the audience, but I want to offer you a chance also to take the mic. Kisai is on the other side with the mic, and I'm over here. So anyone want to question? Right over here.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for coming out today. My question is focused on the distribution of your work. A lot of fake news doesn't just come through Facebook and Twitter, but I think about messaging apps like WhatsApp. So in debunking this news, what distribution systems do you use? And do you also focus on messaging systems, WhatsApp, Messenger, things that don't necessarily link directly back to the internet story itself?
Yeah, so First Drafts is really shifting focus considerably, especially when we deal with, when we work with partners in the Asia Pacific region and in Central and South America, where data is high cost. They pay for text messaging, so they, unlike here where it's kind of wrapped into your entire mobile plan, so they have had a high adoption of WhatsApp. We're very interested in looking at and using WhatsApp to maybe have a burner phone set up so that we can have create a group and invite people in there to not only receive information, but also send information back to people. But how do we do that in a high adoption of social media, but low data plans? And so, we probably won't focus very much on video. We'll have text messaging, and we'll really have a focus on push alerts. The Guardian News Initiative has done a lot with how to make the most effective push notifications. So we'll take those learnings and apply it to this, and then just research it and iterate as we go along. I don't know, everything feels like an A/B test during a collaborative project, so it'll probably be a lot of fits and starts, but we really do have a keen awareness on having our debunks disseminated through the web and mobile apps.
Very good question.
We're terrified of WhatsApp.
Tom, go ahead. Any questions over there? Raise your hand, and Kisai will bring you a mic too.
This came up when we hosted the kind of kickoff workshop in Mexico. We kind of have a participatory process for designing this kind of project, and so how do we deal with cadenas and these like chains that are being shared? It's frankly a different verification process than if you're looking at a video that's being shared on Twitter, right? So we have a kind of dedicated desk for WhatsApp that is led by AJ Plus and is also with we're working with a group called Chicas Poderosas, who are working across Latin America to do a kind of dedicated WhatsApp projects called El Poder de Elegir. They have a kind of emergent methodology that they're rolling out across Colombia, Mexico, I think maybe Brazil, maybe Venezuela. So I think it's kind of a new area for these kind of projects, but it's really important that we think about both involving them and also kind of designing content for those new spaces.
Hi, I'm Jim Schachter from WNYC. Pleased to be part of Electionland again. My impression is that in America, the data shows that most people who vote get most of their news from local TV news, and local TV news doesn't cover elections generally. Is there any kind of creating something for local TV news that ought to be part of initiatives like this so that we actually reach the people who vote?
Great question. I don't know if I have the answer to it. We want to make sure that we invite those partners on board, but as people have mentioned here, local newsrooms suffer from, they don't have like sometimes enough staff to devote resources in terms of attention, energy, and time of reporters to these kinds of projects that might feel like a distraction from. And from my experience, I used to work at Univision, that has a big local news network all around the country, and I know that they are running to a fire, to a child who was kidnapped. So I don't know how a project like Electionland, for instance, would fit in their workflows, but I think we're gonna have to be creative and have conversations with them and try to enable ways for them to participate that aren't super disruptive in their daily workflows that are like super full of things and crazy things, believe me. I'm gonna quote regarding local, I'm gonna quote my colleague Heather. I agree with her a lot with this idea of creating partnerships and not parachutes. We don't have relationships with those communities. They do. They have been working on building that trust over years. So we need them, and we're gonna try to have them on board. I don't know if this answers your question slightly.
I worked on Electionland in 2016. I think actually one of the strengths of the project was the network of local news organizations who were involved, and there was a dedicated team in the New York newsroom who were just getting on the phone with local news stories as we were finding stuff that was happening in Florida or in Texas. There was a team of people who were dedicated to kind of calling the local news organizations, giving them this information so that they could then pick up that story and run with it and publish. So I think trying to find those mechanisms, it's really hard to do that in real time on election day. But for projects like that are running in the lead up to elections, I think it's really important that we build in those loops and also start thinking about the different content types. So at Verificado we're about to put out a little audio hit, which is going to be shared to some of the radio partners. So it's not just a question of the workflow, but also the kind of types of content that you're making. And
yeah, so also understand how they work is really important, and the kinds of stories they cover. So I would say, do not send tips of things that they're not gonna work on television. So try to be mindful of the kinds of stories they like to cover, and and try to create or provide content that they will be interested in.
I am Liza Gross from Solutions Journalism Network. Thank you very much for this very instructive presentation. My question goes to impact, but not audience impact. I mean, there was some conversation about that. And Gregoire alluded briefly about to the impact briefly to the impact on news professionals. And as you do your work, are you thinking too of measuring or getting some perspective on how these new techniques or these new ways of doing journalism is impacting the news professionals? Are they getting better? Are they seeing new possibilities? Is it elevating the level of skills? Is there any plan to measure that, or are you doing it already?
For Crosscheck, we measured that, and it did show that it built capacity in newsrooms, particularly smaller newsrooms. The Rue 98, is it, or 89 brand? Rue 89 brand. They were small newsrooms. They didn't have the capacity to learn how to verify, but this project helped do that. Then, larger organizations that don't have penetration in smaller regions also were able to get their information back from them. And I think, too, going through the cross-checking process does sharpen other journalist skills, because they're going to be looking out for each other. We do, Gregoire mentioned that there was a 2-day boot camp. We try and do boot camps before our projects begin to build trust. And part of that trust is drinking late into the evening, singing karaoke. But you're never your most vulnerable person until you're trying to, to crank out Linda Ronstadt or something. So you have to be vulnerable so that when you are talking to people about some very tough questions over Slack, which is, for people to communicate with, that they have that shorthand, that they aren't that there's no misunderstanding of sarcasm or anything like that. So I think that's our greatest hope, is that we walk away from a project and the newsrooms feel supported, and that they have capacity to train others. And that's what we do when we go into a news or into a operation like this. We do ask that they continue to train.
Yeah, I cannot talk about the American newsroom, for example, but in France and in my own newsroom, that was great to be in Crosscheck, because we had some people who had never heard about verification, about as I said before, the basic skills of verification, never heard about it, didn't know anything about it, who were at the boot camp, and in 2 days they turned into expert in verification. But, and that means if you are a good journalist, you can be good in verification. The problem is there is still a lot to do. For example, I do a lot of trainings. In my newsroom, we are about 1,400 journalists in the world, but there's still a lot to do. And I'm not a specialist. I'm not a geek. I don't know how to code or whatever. But when I'm doing a training, people are saying me like, "Wow, like a Jedi of verification." And but I'm not a Jedi, I can assure you. I'm just a journalist, and I know how to do a reverse search image. I know how to see, for example, metadata on photo. I know, these are the basic skills. And you don't need to be a geek or a Jedi master, but we need to insist on that, because as I underline also, a lot of people have a very high opinion of their job, and okay, this is not writing, this is not reporting, this is for geeks, this is for, I don't know, this is not journalism. But in my own newsroom, once again, I see so many great journalists sharing things on Twitter, for example, without retweeting things, without thinking, and help spreading rumors. For example, during the referendum in Catalonia, in Barcelona, there were a lot of hoaxes, and I see really great journalists without thinking, retweeting fake photos, out of context photos during this referendum. So that's a shame. So we need to insist on that, but yes, there's a lot of work to do, but Crosscheck really helped us to at least to implement this and to have a small bunch, a group of experts, and step by step we're evangelizing evangelize the newsroom.
I have an idea now for a new certificate, Jedi of Collaboration. We can all earn one today. John, you had another question, and then
I just wanted to flip that question a little bit, which was terrific. To what degree, how much emphasis do you place on helping the public to learn these skills? Okay, so kind of media literacy skills.
Right. So we had a 5-unit verification course online that we gave to all of our partners in our network. We can give access to anybody here too if they're interested. But then we made a condensed 1-hour version, and that is open to the public. And it's a bunch of videos that kind of takes you through sort of MTV style catfish. Does anybody know that show? These are the basics of verification, the reverse image search, and to really scrutinize information as a journalist would. For subjects that they would be interviewing in person. So it's just the same skill set that journalists have always had, but a few tools that make you feel like a Jedi Knight.
Aimee, a question that came in I wasn't going to ask because I'm running out of time, but someone wanted to know if you could share the verification checklist that you and Greg talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's do you have a listserv going out after this?
we
Okay.
do.
We'll have all kinds of information and skills building things, and we can also invite you to our closed Facebook group that looks at these kind of questions. We have super Jedi Knights at our in our office that are able to help assess and take in questions.
Awesome. So a great collaborator of ours, Mr. Gene San, has a question.
This might be a little a hard question in the sense that psychologists for years have studied how when people see something, attach onto the idea, even when they read a clear debunking of it, they still hold fast to the original idea. And I'm wondering how you take that into account into two things, both choosing which things we're going to try to debunk, and second of all, is there maybe a psychology-informed approach to how we present it to the public that would minimize that fact? Because this is great and strong work and important work, but I worry that to some degree we're spinning wheels here.
It's the headline writing is key to not repeat the hoax or the rumor in the headline. But you're right. Once things are out, it's hard to take it back, and it's hard to go against your confirmation bias that you want to believe that this thing could be true about a candidate or somebody like that. So my project is hoping to stop some of that before it even hits the mainstream platforms. But once it's out there, not repeating it, using a version of the image, but that is somehow manipulated so it doesn't look exactly like the thing that's been circulating. You might have.
Yeah, that is a tough question because we had this question all along the project. Because the most common comment we had on debunks is, okay, that was false. Maybe you're right, but that could happen. Okay, so that don't change anything. So when you are reading this, the guys say, okay, you're right, but that could happen. So I don't change my mind about this. Your question is why I am working for. Yeah, but I mean, Aimee was right. We're really trying to detect before it's hitting the main platforms. But that is also difficult because we already talked about it. We have a lot of things on closed messaging apps and or on platforms where journalists are not really used to be, like 4chan or platform like that, especially in France. So we have to have something like deep web correspondent to search and to try to eat the disinformation before it's going on the main platforms.
I think the research on the impact of fact-checking and debunking is somewhat mixed, but one of the things that's pretty clear is that it really matters who you hear that information from. And so I think one of there needs to be more research on this, but I think the fact that Verificado or Crosscheck or Electionland is not the BBC or is not AFP or is not the individual organizations who have their own kind of reputations and known. I think that's one area where we can potentially be having more impact because we don't come with the baggage of the organizational reputations. Certainly in Verificado, we making content that's super shareable. So then, you know, if you see something that's been shared by your mum, then that's again is going to have a different impact on you than if it's been shared by some high-profile journalist. So I think making content that's very we have this idea of viralicemos la info confiable. Like we have to share trustable information, and I think that's a really important goal.
Last question, and then we're going to move on. Question came in via ground source about technology and platforms. We've touched on this a little bit. I've heard Slack mentioned. Could you briefly talk a little bit about the technology that you use to collaborate with each other?
It would be great if we had one login and a dashboard that did everything, but for all of our projects, there seems to be 3 or 4 or 5 things that are put together. If Heather Bryant is here, yes. So Heather has built an amazing tool as well to help with that, and so that's really what's been needed. But right now we use direct pings into Slack, and then the journalists talk about it, talk about the debunk, and work through it there. I think we were using Check as well for cross-check, and then you can already hear the logins, right? How many passwords have I just remembered? And then the 4th platform would be WordPress, where we actually publish the debunk.
Yeah, so I work for Meedan. We build Check, which is an open source tool for teams and communities to find and go through a process of verification. It kind of provides that the shared process across a team of 1,000 people working on Electionland or 150 on Verificados. So I think there's more investment needed in I'm going to be self-serving here, but more investment needed in tools that can support this kind of collaboration for sure.
For Electionland, I like to think about 2 sets of tools. One is for partners, and Slack is going to be our main way of communicating with them. But this is a project that is based on the idea of listening to people's problems, which I think is something crucial. And we want to make sure that we open every possible channel that it's available for us and that it's manageable for us. Where they can talk about their problems when they are trying to vote. So we're going to have Facebook bots, we're going to have WhatsApp, we're going to have text messaging, and we're going to have the help of voters' hotlines. So that's like the way I like to think about it in 2 ways, one for us and one for them.
Well, this has been really a great presentation, very inspiring and thoughtful work. Let's hope that we will grow more Jedi journalists and even Jedi moms, okay? So let's thank everybody here on the panel.